I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Hey guys, if you like what I'm doing, click the Amazon banner at the top of the homepage on FascinationStreetPod.com and do all of your shopping through Amazon. Once you click on it and it takes you to Amazon, you can bookmark it or add it to your favorites and you won't have to go to my site each time. It helps me keep the show going, and again, thanks for listening. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Aalics Bronson. Aalics is currently a bass player with the Jean Marx Express, and he's touring Europe as we speak. I was lucky enough to chat with him while he was in Dresden, Germany, about his life and his experiences and some of the cool stuff he's done. In this episode, we talk a little bit about the math of music, as well as what in the heck is a guitar tech, a bass tech, also building pedal boards, and stage managing. We touch on some of the work he's done with Living Colour, 24/7 Spyz, Fishbone, even Lauryn Hill. And of course, we talk about his time in New York City and the really cool things that he's doing there. So enjoy, folks. This is Captain Save-A-Ho himself, Aalics Bronson.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Aalics Bronson. How are you doing today, Aalics?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Thank you.
It is absolutely my pleasure. So, the way that I came across you is I'm a big fan of Stephen O'Reilly's The Bar Star podcast.
Yes, yeah.
And you and I have in common that we are both previous guests on that show. I love Steve. He's the greatest. And so when I heard your episode, you know, this is probably 6 months ago or something, you know, I put you on a list. Now, it sounds weird because people get put on lists for different things. But yeah, I put you on a list as a future guest, and as random happenstance, it turned out last night that we were able to sort of connect. So that was kind of cool.
Kismet. Hey, man, that's the universe talking.
That is. It's the great magnet. And so I'm glad that you were able to fit me in real quick, because word on the street is you have a history of sort of not calling people back for a few months.
Yeah. Well, if you can see my schedule, you can kind of see why. It's a bad habit that I have.
Well, the fact that you were in Germany last night and the Czech Republic today, or Poland, or wherever the hell you are, I feel like that sort of speaks to your busyness, and the busy people get shit done. So you can't harass them for that, right?
I try. Let's put it there. Busy's the word right now, and you know, for anyone who's listening, peace and respect. You know, yes, I do have a bad habit of not calling people back. Mostly my close friends, because they know me, and I appreciate their patience at times.
Yeah, it's like family. You can get away with a little bit less or more, or however you want to phrase it.
All right. Correct. And yes, and considering like right now I'm in Germany, last night I was in Czech Republic and Poland.
Oh, I had it backwards. That's funny.
It's all good. Listen, after a while it turns backwards.
Yeah, I bet it does. Do they drive on the wrong side of the road over there?
No, that's more north in the UK and in like Ireland and the London area, most definitely.
Well, how about this? Do they drive on the wrong side of the car where you are?
You know what? It's more like the roads are extremely small.
Like narrow?
Like so narrow that you either have to pull over to let the other one go, or you have a small traffic jam in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, that's awesome. For those of you who don't know, thank you, Dwight Eisenhower, for not keeping us in that situation.
There you go.
So, Aalics, I believe you grew up in Louisville, but were you born there also?
Different world at that time, but yes, Louisville, Kentucky is my home. Being born through my teens and my youth is Kentucky, and then the rest is New York.
Everybody is so sweet and nice there.
It's almost scary, like too nice and sweet. Anybody will talk to you as soon as you start a conversation. How are you doing is not just I'm good and keep walking away. It's like a 20-minute conversation with a stranger.
Yeah, it's almost scary in the same way that movie Get Out was scary.
Yes, I was just ready to say that.
Yeah, because you're like, wait a minute, these people are too nice. What's going on? But it turns out everybody's just drunk on bourbon, so they're in a good mood. Ow!
Hey, either that or PBR.
So you're growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, and then all of a sudden you decide to go to the Fashion Institute in New York. Is that right?
Yeah. I was in school, and at a point, long story short, I used to play football and I got hurt. And I took up a whole nother thing, which was fashion design. And I went to vocational school, and then opportunity to like, hey, let's go to, check out FIT, Pratt, or those other design schools. And I chose FIT in the midst of still playing music. FIT is what got me into New York. Big change.
What does FIT stand for?
The Fashion Institute of Technology.
Oh, okay. I kept wanting to say the Fashion Institute of Texas because here in Texas, we think the world revolves around us.
It's a big state. I call it the second country of ours.
I was like, oh, the Fashion Institute of Texas. It must be the New York campus. Okay, great. So what about fashion drew you to it, especially coming from a sports background?
It was the creativeness. I always had a thing for art in general growing up, but to be able to put your idea on paper and create something from nothing is what drew me into fashion in general. It was more art and the color, but then the clothing stuff came actually second. It was in an interesting sense. So, I have an eye for an idea and it just went from there. And, the story just moves into, well, you know what? You have $75 in a U-Haul truck and you're moving to New York. Let's go.
So how old were you when you did that?
Early 20s.
And if you had to guess roughly around what year was that ish?
Early 90s.
Okay. So everybody that I talked to that was in New York on that day, I asked them to tell me about their experience on that day. Can you talk about your time in New York on 9/11?
Yes, sure. Wow, what a day. That morning, I was working a security job. I worked at security in office for a homeless shelter. And I would go in super early. And I had a friend of mine who I used to work at a skate shop when we were younger, just moving in New York. He worked downtown there. And well, start with that. That was the last time I ever saw him. But yeah, dude, that day was crazy. When you're going through your everyday, in New York, there's always sirens and police and everything else. When it becomes abnormal, as in there's a lot of police and a whole lot of fire trucks and stuff moving south, you really start to wonder because, there's a lot of energy in New York. But that day was something spectacular and not in a good way. But, to have fear of New York, to have fear outside of the United States and everyone else and their theories on what goes on, as living in New York at that time, it was like there's a lot of things that New Yorkers are not fearful of. But when that type of act has happened, you either come together, it's a fight or flight, and you come together with some stuff, and that no matter where you were in the city, no matter who you were affected by it. There's people in my life who, like my wife will, that day has to be one of those shutdown days because, people play the video of that whole process for the day. It hits home. But, here we all are still survivors of it. But the destruction and the things that I've seen within that and just going through that whole day was like, it's a bad movie that you can't erase.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sorry that you lost your friend, and I would assume some acquaintances as well. I'm sorry about that.
And I'd actually appreciate people asking who are not from New York, because everyone has a story, but the only true stories for the points are anyone who's truly affected. And I mean that by living in New York and experiencing your disruption of life. You're not watching it on TV and having your own assessment to it. It changes perspective when it's actually you.
And that's why I like to ask the people that I talk to who were there, because, you know, they all have a unique experience that I am wholly unfamiliar with. Because like you said, I was just watching it on TV going, what in the serious shit?
Yeah. It's like, what the serious shit when you're actually seeing fighter jets start flying the skies.
Well, the fighter jets I'm used to because I live in San Antonio, and my whole life there's been 4 or 5 different military bases here. So I see jets all the time, but everything else that went along with that day is, yeah, that's wholly foreign.
Yeah, and that makes sense, you know, point was like, but in New York City, Manhattan alone is only basically 5 miles wide and 10 miles long. It's an island. So
Right.
At a point, you don't see jets fly. You know, again, like you say, if you're there, and it's a common place for a lot of people, but when it disrupts your life, like why are there fighter jets flying over Manhattan at low altitudes, you know?
Right.
You know?
And let me ask you this. I've been to New York a couple of times, obviously, you know, after that event. And what I did notice is that nonstop, there are, I think, at least 2 helicopters circling the island all day long.
Yes.
Is that new? Like, is that a post 9/11 event?
Well, there's a couple of things that could happen. It could be there are helicopter tours or people who do fly. There's a helicopter pad on the west side of the highway. But as far as military, and I live in an area where you can see that, it's not as rampant as it was then, but there are constant military presence, you know, in the skies.
Well, good. I mean, sadly, I guess that needs to be the case at least for a while, and it's already been a while. So
yeah, exactly. It's not if anything else could happen, it's when.
Yeah, it's when and where. I remember right after that, since we had so many military bases here in San Antonio, there was a lot of speculation that we were pretty high on that list also. Mm-hmm. But, you know, thank goodness, you know, there wasn't another event directly after that. Right.
No, I get it. You know, people can argue points all day, but I'm one of those, like, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And if something kind of disrupts me a little bit, that's a first world problem that we have. You know, I'd rather be disrupted just a touch with considered safety than anything else right now.
Indeed. Well, thank you for sharing. I know that is a very touchy and, you know, that's a raw spot. So thank you for sharing that. And now let's talk about some cooler shit.
Right on.
All right. So I believe that you started playing like the violin and the cello somewhere around age 7. Is that right?
My first instrument was violin, about 7 or 8, which is my son's 9. He's playing cello now, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, I had a family friend's daughter played violin, and that just stuck, just out of the blue. And from how I grew up, it was just like, what? And yeah, started violin, moved to cello, saxophone, guitar, bass, and upright bass and bass.
Damn, son.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. Any string instrument, let's go for it.
I don't have a musical bone in my body, unlike yourself, which apparently almost all your bones are musical. You play a lot of instruments, man.
You know what? It's fun. You know, it helped me get through school. You know, it really did.
In what way? Math
and science. A lot of people don't realize how much math you use in music and in science of sound and the texture of music. You know, it's all relatable. You know, simple things. I learned how to divide by playing music.
Explain music and division.
Whole notes, half notes, quarter notes. Counts in 1, 2, 3, 4. Break that down into halves is 1, 2, and quarters is 1. So at a point, you know, it's in 4. 4 counts in 4 times 4. Blah blah blah. And moving on. And as a bass player and rhythmic wise, there's just a point of being able to, your counting, your rhythms, your movements, and where to place notes. You know, so it just kind of works backwards. And even, you know, with math, for me, it's like playing bass is like playing on a grid. There's a point of weird algebra and stuff involved in it, too.
Gotcha. After all of those instruments, which sounds like all of them, why did you end up settling or switching to the bass guitar?
Sausage fingers. Bass was that quiet strength of an instrument. It controls everything. I call it the quiet ego. how I feel and how I play is how the rest of the band plays too. And I got to play well with others or I don't work.
Interesting.
Basically, like, if you think about it, and I think I mentioned this before a couple times, people have heard it, like there are very few, if any, music on the radio today without bass, except for one. And that's Prince's song Kiss does not have a bass line on the radio edit.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, go back and check it out. It's pretty interesting. Only song on radio history that hits in history that does not have a bass line.
Wow. That's crazy. Just so that I have this straight, you're in Germany right now?
Yes, I am in Dresden, Germany right now. At like 2.5, 3 hours south of Berlin. So it's really close to the Czech and Polish borders. Got
you. Now, word on the street is I am a lot of % Czech and Polish, but who knows how true that is? That's just, grandparents telling stories as far as I know.
Right on.
Okay, so let's talk about you in New York. So New York is when you, I guess, decided to really get into music as a professional musician, right?
Correct.
Why did you make that decision, and how hard was it to do in the biggest city in America?
It wasn't a decision of mine. Music chose me. You don't really choose it in a sense of what we're doing, what I do, and most of the people do in general. People enjoy it. I do love it. And it's a love-hate relationship as anything. New York was, because I've always, like I said, I played a bit. I was a late bloomer in playing in bands in general, but hooked up with some friends and just being young and was like, hey, I want to start a band. I wasn't thinking about being professional at all. It was just, I'm in New York. I played, met some people who play also, and just went out there and did everything that everyone else would do. Try to book a gig, blah, blah, blah. The transition from just playing around to actually being professional, when you make $1 more than you had before, you become professional. That's how I put it, because you get paid for doing it. So the New York hustle is really not about the money, but more about, honing your craft and being the best you can be. I don't know the exact time that I really was, I'm going to do this for professionally. I think I was tired of actually working an office gig. My soul and my heart wasn't satisfied. And just the combination of meeting the right people and doing, just going out there and doing it. There's no booklet of how this is done. It's just the experiences of what you do can lead you to the next thing if you keep your ears and eyes open. I just started meeting, different people. And since the thing they say there was 6 degrees of separation of people is very true. I will always say that. Most of my gigs that I have now and people that I know in the industry are from meeting from other friends. And that's really it. The history of, me working on my craft is one thing, and New York will set you in a good place or a bad place if you know or don't know how to play. It's very brutally honest. But yeah, I think I mentioned I work with Living Color. I work with 24/7 Spyz. It's just being that kid, going to a couple shows, see a couple shows of Living Color as a big fan. And one day I met the bass player after a gig somewhere in the city, talked with him a bit. We became friends, and 20 plus years later, here I am.
Now, when you say that you worked with Living Color, in what capacity did you work with them?
The bass tech and guitar tech for Living Color and stage production manager for them.
And what exactly is a bass and a guitar tech?
I do everything that people don't see. When you go to a show and there's, the gear set up, the pedals, guitars are tuned. There's somebody, but besides the band member who does that. Right.
Well, for big bands, yeah.
Yeah, for big bands, but it's like if you can't do it yourself, you're not going to be doing it for a big band. But, that they don't have time. So there's, someone that puts all this stuff together. I'm the guy behind the scenes, and always say, nobody knows what I do until I don't do it.
There you go. That's a great description.
And it's a very important job in general. I know the ins and outs of all gear, how the show is supposed to go, how it's supposed to sound. I'm one of the technicians behind the scene. that makes them look good at the point when you're screaming at them, you're actually screaming for me.
Now, is that the same role that you had when you worked with 24/7 Spyz?
Yeah, yes and no. More so, well, again, my relationships were friendships, and with Jimmy Hazel, I was working with a project of my own. I had my own band, and we've been friends, and we actually did some work together musically. And he played guitar on some tracks and stuff, and him and I worked together musically on some of his stuff, and some other things that are going on in the music. I'm kind of laughing because it just brought back a memory of Jimmy Hazel and I auditioning in 1999. We auditioned for Puff Daddy in a project.
Really?
Yeah,
that sounds fascinating.
It's a fascinating thing. It's kind of surreal, but yeah, working with them and him and I. Then now that 24/7 Spyz has a new record out, I've been behind the scenes helping them with the guitar sounds for the recording that they did. Outside of the music stuff, I built pedal boards for them and some other stuff. In production work, just like I said, to get the sound sounding good. It's not just guys plugging in guitars at a time. There's work behind it.
How do you find the time to do all that stuff, man?
You're not looking to find the time if you enjoy it and do what you do. Like they say, it's not work if you really have fun doing it. And if I was sitting at home, not working in those type of situations, I'll still be doing the same thing. So, after a while, when you figure out it's like, I don't need someone to punch in a clock, go into the office, I can create my own business and industry. So there's points when I build pedal boards for them, or I'm teching, or I'm working on sound design, or, stage production, which is my next thing after this tour that I have with my band, Jean Marx Express. Then I go out with Chronics on his tour, and I'm his stage manager. And that takes me to a whole nother realm of sound and music and everything else.
Thank you for describing those different duties or those job titles or whatever, but what does being a stage manager entail? And is it for an entire tour?
Yeah, this will be for an entire tour. Sometimes, the job itself is, particularly for just that night. And it's basically, the title itself is managing the stage. It's making sure everything is where it's supposed to be, how it sounds, from if there's troubleshooting for the keyboards not working, or, as I use Living Color, for example, you're plugging in stuff and there's all the sounds and effects and everything going on. I need to know how all of that operates. So if something goes down within the show needs to continue without you knowing that it's probably broken or something when happening. I am the fix-it guy.
Gotcha. You're the fixer.
Yeah, I'm a fixer at a point, or as some in the industry, and I'll use excuse the way I say it, but I'm Captain Save-A-Ho.
I love it.
But literally, like Jimmy Hazel, those guys gave me that term. It's like I'm the one that goes in when they call me. I'm the one that comes in and saves all the hoes for their troubles.
That is hilarious.
And as artists, that's what this is what we call a pimp and whore business.
Indeed. Do you get to wear a cape?
Yeah, there's sometimes I should. There's really sometimes I should. I can go in detail of stories that if it wasn't for me, shows would not be happening at all.
Well, that is kick ass.
And I'm not talking just a small, corner pub show where we're talking, 20, 30, 40,000 seaters. It's like if it was, sometimes it wasn't for me, shit would just not work.
Oh, that's a good question. So as a performer, as a musician, what's the largest crowd that you've played to that you can remember?
For myself as a performer and a bass player, 80,000.
Oh, shit. What band was that with?
We won't go into it, but yeah, it was 80,000.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Were you any more nervous playing for 80 than 8?
I get more nervous playing for 8. And I was just funny you say, because I was just thinking the largest is 80, the lowest is 2. But 8, yeah, if there's 8 people, that's a whole lot of work you have to put in to keep those 8 entertained.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been to a couple of comedy shows where I was the only person there, and it really seemed like they were working harder because, if you got 80,000 people, 50% of them aren't happy. You still have 40,000 people that are happy, but if you've got, two people and half of them are not happy, that means one person is happy about what you're doing. So that's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. 80 was the biggest that I can remember at this point. And it's still nerve-wracking. Trust me.
I'm sure.
The energy of that is something that's undescribable. If it's not your everyday, it's a whole different world.
I bet it is. So what country was that in?
That was in Poland, opening for Garbage and Prodigy.
No shit.
Yes.
So what kind of music was that band? Was it like a punk or house music, or what was it?
That was kind of a mix of an R&B, hip-hop, rock type thing.
Interesting.
The only reason I'm not saying a lot because it's still there's history of it, and then there's
no worries.
But yeah, it's it was interesting to meet the members like Prodigy and not realize that that's who they were. Just as now the singer committed suicide not too long ago.
Yeah, a couple of weeks I think.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. It's like like having that memory of having lunch with him and one of the nicest again, it's a Kentucky abnormally nice person and not know who that's the lead singer for the guy for this crazy ass band who rocked. But yeah, that was Poland. That was for a festival that we opened up for.
Can you tell me about when you were in a band called Red Lotus?
Red Lotus, yes. That was one rockin' band I played in for sure. Roz, Gavin, and Jean Marx. Jean Marx and I are playing together now with the Jean Marx Express. But yeah,
shit.
Yeah. Him and I kind of transitioned from that into this.
Oh, cool. Now, Jean Marx he's got hair down to the floor or something, right?
Yeah, he has dreads down, to his ankles. It's almost.
And they're dreads, not braids, right?
No, they're real dreads. It's we just had this conversation yesterday in Czech when someone was asking how long. He's like 17, 18 years growing his dreads.
Oh, man, that's crazy. That seems like a lot of work, and it looks heavy.
You don't want to get hit with one of those when he swings his It's a confusing feeling.
Imagine at a certain point, it just feels like somebody's slapping you in the face with a rope.
Yeah, that's basically exactly what it is. Exactly what it is.
My dad has long hair. He's been a bass player for my whole life. Like, he used to have a motorcycle, and when I was younger, I'd ride on the back of the motorcycle with him, and his long hair would just beat the shit out of my face. So I can't even imagine, if it was all wrapped up into a rope slapping me, I'd probably be dead.
Yeah, it's pretty. I've been hit by them a few times, and then after a while, it's kind of like, I'm gonna stay on my side of the stage now. I'm bald, I'm good, but it's an interesting feeling. Like I said, they are ropes. They become ropes.
That's hilarious. Now, just a real quick, I just want to bounce back to your New York days and ask you, did you ever play or get to go to any shows at CBGB's?
Yeah, I played at CBGB's many times. As we talk about Red Lotus was one of my first projects of actually, hitting the stage of CBGB's and a few other places in the Village at the time. You build up to be able to play on that stage. You hit the smaller clubs around and build your reputation up to really get to that point. And your music had to be something. It couldn't be just bubblegum every day. It didn't work that way. It was this not cover band material. It was like you go in there with originals and you fire up and go. You cut a lot of teeth in learning about the industry and being involved in music playing there.
Was Hilly Crystal, was he around at the time? Did you get to meet and know him?
Yes. Didn't know him personally in general, but spoke to him and face to face and also on the phone booking shows. There was another, he had an assistant, but it was either her or he was working on some stuff, and that was you don't know you're part of history till it's gone.
Right.
That right there. I was just thinking about that the other day. Is playing that club. Cutting your teeth in that club, one of my first tech gigs actually was with Living Color as they reunited in early 2000. I was actually tech and bass tech for that. And the stage of CBGB's is not that big. It seems like it is, but it's a weird shape and that big. And it was like I'm sitting in the corner on stage, kind of like I can't get off the stage. This thing is just fucking huge. This band is huge. Like, this is actual Living Color. No, but yeah, there's a lot of, saw a lot of bands there. Sunday afternoon shows, and that was like the punk and the heavy rock scene.
Hey, streetwalkers. Well, you're not literally streetwalkers, but now that I've got your attention, I am Stephen O'Reilly, and I have a podcast called the Bar Star Podcast. And since you're listening to the Fascination Street podcast, I think you should check out my show. It's just as interesting without all the famous people, because Steve has connections that I just do not have. But if you dig podcasts about music, working musicians, and other random shit that I decided to talk about, based around music, of course, because that's what I do. I'm a working musician for the past 30 years, then you need to check out the Bar Star Podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcast, on any platform, and make sure you check out barstarpodcast.com. Now back to the one and only Steve Owens and whatever the hell he was talking about.
Just real quick, let's talk about Fishbone. What did you do with them? And are you still friendly?
Still friendly, yes. Production tech, same thing. That they have their own people who work out. Norwood and I, as a bass player also, so it's a different vibe when, you get someone who is not just a tech, but also a player, if that makes any sense. There are, a lot of people who work in a profession who do not work in the profession outside of just working it. I happen to be a player as well, so there's a different technique to it all. But with Fishbone, there's a festival called Afropunk, and Living Color, Fishbone, and Bad Brains were debuting together for first time in anything. And so I got the call from Doug, the bass player for Living Color, like, yo, come down. But then the tour manager for Fishbone called me to come work the show completely. And, same thing is like, basically Norwood comes in, this is what I like and don't like, and I take care of the rest. But then, it becomes like a bass player dream to be able to work with these three bands and be like, okay, I'm the tech for these three bass players who are like the biggest amongst the big,
That makes sense. Now, currently, we had mentioned that you are on tour across Europe, I guess. How is touring in other countries different from touring in the United States?
If I can be brutally honest, which I will always be, it's a lot better.
In what way?
People respect and appreciate you as a musician, as an artist, doing this more than a lot of people in the States. You can really make money out here without struggling too much. The situations where if you're playing at a place in the States, you're only getting a drink ticket and a parking pass. Here we're, even on a basic level, that, the Chitlin circuit, that they're feeding you, so like if you're, free drinks or whatever, they're feeding you and they have a place for you to sleep without you having to pay for a hotel. And that they appreciate it. Like even this morning, it's like, even my delay of talking with you earlier, it's like the club owner fixed breakfast.
Really?
For the band, What place anywhere in the States will the owner of the club have breakfast for you?
Most of the places in the States, the owner of the house you live in won't make breakfast for you. That's awesome.
Exactly. So, there's a different appreciation of arts, music, and being creative here, which, it doesn't tend for everybody, but I can speak for myself in general. But that, I know the difference is this. Again, it just goes back to there's a lot more appreciation of music and you taking the time out to play music for, certain places here without always having the numbers of you need to bring 1,000 people in to even get paid so much money. And also it tends to, it's not always about the cover band scene either, which is not bad. It's original music. People just really enjoy actually instrumentation as much as, some places like DJ and clubs. which is the younger moments now. But yeah, big differences.
Interesting. Now, how many countries have you played in, and do you have a favorite?
It'd be easier for what I have not played in. I've been doing this for a minute, but wow, a favorite? I can't say, because it's a new experience, in a lot of places. There are places that I would not play again, I wouldn't go back to. But with the relations, again, it goes back to relationships, and they're great when you can follow, again, a club owner or promoter, online. Somebody's grandmother, one of the club owners' grandmother, can't wait to see you again because she's going to fix you some blood sausage. She wants to make sure you're coming. You don't get that in the States.
Yeah, no kidding. What country was it that there's basically, I think you described it as like an old man music police in these small villages?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's part of where we are now. Is the Eastern Bloc of Europe. We call it the music police, which are just old purists of music. The guys who really appreciate. A lot of people don't understand the history of music here. They didn't get Jimi Hendrix. They didn't get all this stuff because the music was blocked back in the day for the GDR period. So a lot of the older music, true musicians are playing, from Zeppelin back, even American music is huge. And we have these guys. It's not like official, but it's one of those, we call them the music police. And a lot of the promoters and a lot of the booking people will go to them and say, like, what's good for a certain type of music? And these guys will be like, hey, I like this band, or I like that band, or don't like this, or that's bullshit, or this or that and the third. And it's like they're really the ones who call out the underground scene of what's going to happen next in the music here. And
sort of like Hilly Crystal.
Yes, exactly. Same thing. But, you don't really recognize who they are. They're not like have a big T-shirt and say music police on it. But then you start to realize the same guys and the same attitudes and about the music and how they talk to you. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, you're talking to another promoter, someone else. Oh, I spoke to such and such told me about you guys. And it's like, whoa, okay. And, they'll be the ones sitting in a corner with a pint of beer, not saying a word, and then leave as soon as the show's over. So they're the really cool old dudes, and they're really nice, or they can be really mean.
So I want you to tell one more story, if you wouldn't mind,
Sure.
before I start really getting into the Jean Marx Express. I heard you tell a story about you playing in Canada with the magnificent Lauryn Hill. Do you mind telling that story? It was so good.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Which part?
The part where there were some things that you wouldn't do because you are a Southern gentleman.
Oh, there, yeah. Well, let's start with that, yeah. So yeah, we're in Canada doing a festival. It's a two-parter where Snoop Dogg was sharing the bill. He was on a different stage. So with Lauryn Hill, we're out Canada. It was all kind of craziness, just getting across. So everyone was pretty tense in general, getting across the border. But when we finally got to the place and started setting up, one of the things we mentioned, because it was an outdoor festival, thousands of people, and it was just windy. And something just told me to tell the Glam Squad, which is her fashion people with all the dudes. I call it the Glam Squad, which they do all her wardrobe and everything else. It's windy. Please do not put her in a skirt or a mini skirt or any of the sort. Well, that memo didn't happen. Doing the set, and her management or her assistant has stage fright. Long story short, we're sitting there, and all of us, like, we're on a high stage and everything's below you, and she's wearing a mini skirt. And they had set up, fans in front of her and on the sides, and somebody had these fans going on full blast. So we're sitting there, and I started noticing the cameras of, the media taking photos, and they're shooting straight up her skirt. And the stage manager wouldn't come out. Her assistant stage manager would not come out and adjust it would be easier just to adjust the fans, because the fans are blowing the skirt up. So these guys are getting some glory shots, if you can imagine. And they're all looking at me like, you need to be over there and adjust the fans because this other person wouldn't do it. And I was like, no. And so fast forward with all that.
Hold on. Why were you like, no?
Well, that was a point because fast forward. The point is,
okay, sorry.
If I bent down to adjust the fans from the floor, looking up to where she is, only thing I'm going to see is all her stuff, because you have to see where the wind is blowing. And like really after that, like I said, a fast forward is a little bit, but really after that show, she called me to her dressing room and everybody's like, yo, she's pissed. She's mad, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, for what? So I walk in the dressing room. She's like, how come you didn't do the fans? How come you didn't move the fans? And I told her point blank, because I'm looking at you. I was born and raised a Southern gentleman by a Black Indian grandmother. Who would I look like bending over to look up your skirt, looking at what trim you just put on your snatch to tell me to move fucking fans around? I was like, that's not my job. And my grandmother's not going to turn around in her grave and be like, I taught you better. I could care less. I was like, and I took my words exactly. I give no fucks who you are. I am a Southern gentleman, and that's what I am not going to do.
Well, that had to go over well. How was her reaction to that? Was that your last show with her?
No, actually, it literally was at that moment. It was a quiet moment for a second, and then she was like, true. She was like, clearly noted and understood. And I was like, now good. That we have, but it was like, it was literally the conversation was, now that we have that straight, don't let that shit ever happen again. And she's like, well, I need for someone to come out there and do it. And I'm like, well, then you need to hire someone to do that because it ain't going to be me. Let me go back and do my job unless I get fired. But I was not fired for that. I actually left that situation about a year or so later.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, it was cool. It was cool. Experience.
That's a great story.
Good experience.
Let's talk about the Jean Marx Express.
Jean Marx Express, yes.
Now, I think you said that Jean Marx was in Red Lotus with you, right?
Yes. Red Lotus was a project with my sister girl, Roz Nash, great singer. And we actually had the original drummer for Red Lotus was a gentleman named Swiss Chris, who was the past music director for John Legend. He left us to do music director for John Legend. And Kirk Douglas on guitar, who is now playing on TV with The Roots.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, they were the original members of Red Lotus. And time passed. Kirk left and had a few other people. And Jean Marx came into the picture as he was out with his band. And he was also doing a lot of major guitar work as well. And I invited him to come to a show at CBGB's. We were actually opening up for 24/7 Spyz. And he totally forgot about the show. And when he saw the show, he came back and he was like, yeah, I want in. So that's where Jean Marx and I met at a music store, Sam Ashton, New York. But he actually joined the band right after that, after CBGB show. Played a couple years with Red Lotus. And when that disbanded, we took some time off, and he was actually here in Europe doing some work. And he started Jean Marx Express. The name wasn't his choice. It was just something to do as another situation. Music stuff is not always glorified when your, bands start through necessary changes. He was in Europe and I was in Kentucky. I took a break from playing music actually after Red Lotus and took a break, and he called me up from Europe like, I need your help. He had a band situation that he was only subbing for that fell apart and needed somebody to come in and just cover some gigs. And that's how we started as a trio, rock blues trio, with a little taste of ambient, electronica and a few other crazy stuff.
eat you all you know and all you are. Flying over vermin, race through the brain. A never-ending marathon with the owner still the same. 'Cause I'm sick inside. High price of glory, child of the lost. Need sacrificial angels at whatever rate or cost. My brother healer, dark night to shine. Come out from evil shell to fix the matter of our time. 'Cause I'm sick inside. Brand new illness. It's sick inside.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's all good.
I love that song.
Wow. Thank you.
So how long are you on tour right now? Like, how many more dates do you have with this current tour?
15 more shows. I'm back in the States May 1st. This is a month run that we're doing here in Europe in preparation of a new record that we're working on now. Our past record, Skip the Story, that song I was kind of surprised, was not on the CD, but we have a lot of new music working. So this run here, spring run, is kind of testing the waters on some new material and finishing up this record for the year to go back out in the spring of Europe next year. But we're hoping to do a few shows in the States in between the work that I'm doing with Chronics and some other people.
Gotcha. Now, I guess it's no secret that you smoke the weed.
No secret. It helps me not choke the shit out of somebody. So, I can't fight or talk about health benefits for other people and stuff. Again, to each his own, but this is what I do. 9 times out of 10, and not being proud of, like people are like, oh, you smoke too much, or whatever. I would say 8 out of 10 times if you see me, I'm probably high, but you have no idea.
Gotcha.
And I don't smoke to get high, and it's not that type of party. For me, it's a freedom, and there's creative freedom, and no, I don't need it, but it does help. I have my own anxieties with stuff, and it helps not to have anxieties when you're performing at times or in situations. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. And, there's times when I just don't smoke it at all because, like I said, I don't need it. But it's good to have, like money.
This is going to sound like a weird question, but what was it like to be a black man in Russia?
That was interesting. Yeah, you cannot be by yourself pretty much. One of the things they made clear was you don't go out by yourself in Russia. Not that it's like a bad place, but in considering as a person of color, being a black man, there's a lot of people in this world who have never seen a black person before.
Right, and Russia has to be at the top of that list, right?
Yeah, Russia and anywhere far eastern bloc of Europe, many have not seen a person of color or a black person. And in the 21st century and where we are in life, people will still have not seen that, except maybe on TV, but then there's the stereotypes of that. It's difficult at times. It's humorous at times, and it's difficult at times. And there's times when, even just like yesterday, it's like, okay, let the circus begin, because what comes next. You get the stares, people staring at you. And you could imagine with Jean Marx and his locks going down to his ankles, people want to touch you. And it's you become display.
People want to touch you just because you're black? Like, to touch you to see if you're real?
Yeah, see if you're real. They want to touch you. Like, this has happened before. They literally try to grab your nose and touch your nose and your skin to see if it rubs off or anything like that.
Your nose?
Yeah, dude. It's like your personal space can be violated at times because people, this is how enamored people are about it. If you've never seen something and it's right there in front of you. We've actually seen, near close car accidents. It's like that stereotypical craziness of what, again, someone's never seen a person of color. And you could imagine a Eastern European woman in her 80s walking down the street or wherever in her village, wherever she is, and one of us shows up. And you don't have TV. A lot of Europeans don't even watch TV. The internet technology is better, but there's a lot of things going on. The TV's not on, it's not sucking you mentally dry like some places are. But then it's like, again, you've never seen a person of color. It's a shock. And it's kind of hard to even believe that it's happening today. But it's like, yes.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy, like I said. And sometimes it's humorous, sometimes it's cool, and sometimes it's like, are you fucking kidding me? But, like really, it's like, later this week, we're going to Slovakia. Places you only read about. Have you ever been to Slovakia?
No, I have not.
Right. Think of it, then move that to a black person going to Slovakia.
Right.
And
I mentioned that I'm supposedly a great deal Polish and Czech, but also supposedly there's some Slovakian in me as well. So.
And that's the thing, and that's it. And you could imagine, think about that. That's pretty awesome that you even have that history, of knowing that.
Well, allegedly,
but you have a direction of that. There's people in Poland I know today. Like, I've known people, like, I've lived in Poland for a minute, but there's a point of people who have never seen a black person. I think the best part in general is you're not treated as an alien in general after a while. It's almost like now most people want to sit and talk with you.
Interesting.
Like when I say talk to you, it's kind of like, I really don't want to talk anymore.
Yeah, I bet. Speaking of not wanting to talk anymore, this is going to almost be over, so I just have a couple more things to...
I appreciate you doing this. I think this is awesome, man. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. What the fuck is the cubby hole?
The cubby hole is... Someone else asked that the other day, too. That's funny. The cubby hole is my workspace. It is a studio / creative workspace for anyone. It's basically the man cave that I have turned into my office. And it's a studio, complete studio, music instruments, drums, guitar, bass, keyboards, horns, all set up at any point. If you walk downstairs and you turn an guitar amp on, I am ready to record you at any point. It's full tracking, recording setup. I sit there most of the days when I'm not working and on stage and stuff and working on other stuff, but that's literally like my office / studio workplace. And I do everything there, from scheduling and working out my production stuff to building boards and, rehearsing bands and other stuff as well. That's where the main meetings of the minds, and I can be, one of the few to say this, that Living Color, Fishbone, 24/7 Spyz, and Bad Brains will be doing a few shows, and maybe tours in the very near future together.
No shit.
And that meeting happened at the Cubbyhole. The whole process is being able to be a free space for positive creative outlet. Even down to my 9-year-old son coming down, and he'll jump on the drums, or he has his own bass and everything else. And some of his friends come down and they'll mess around with stuff, and nothing's off limits because that's what it's there for. And, I just did a recording session before I left to come on this tour with, a couple artists, and, going to have more when I get back. But that's, it's a good place to chill.
What a lucky kid you have.
Yeah, the kid's lucky. I'm lucky me. It's at a point of being able, to wake up and still be in my pajamas and just walk downstairs and do what I love to do. I can work myself to get paid for what I do, and I'm still in my drawers. So.
That is really lucky. You're right about that. That's fucking awesome, man. I never even heard of that before. That's really cool. Things
come out of necessity at a point. It's like, New York studio prices are expensive. I've had the years of playing and doing production stuff. And I've gathered, instruments, gear, or whatever else, to the point where I looked up one day and I'm like, you know what? I don't have to go anywhere to do what I need to do. Being blessed and, however you say it, put upon the universe. And we lived in an apartment. My wife and I had an apartment not too far from where we are now. And the apartment complex burned. And with the prices and stuff, we wanted to be where we wanted to be. And it just happened to have this space. And she was like, you can start your studio here. You can start your production company. And that's written. The Cubbyhole is an extension of Cubby Productions, which is my production company.
Oh, get out of here.
And so it's everything that I do musically under an umbrella, and expands from there. But, I'm starting a series, hopefully working on a web series of Who's in the Cubbyhole.
Oh, man, that sounds awesome. Sort of like that thing that Daryl Hall did?
Yeah, like Daryl Hall did. I have friends who worked on that stuff. And it was like, a shorter, hip version of that without, everybody just playing. But it's like, I've had guys come in and, we can talk stuff, and people visiting and creating new ideas and blah, blah, blah. And I tell anybody who comes through, please understand, if you walk in this room, you can and will be recorded. You don't want something being recorded and put out, somewhere. Don't pick up an instrument in this room.
That is hilarious. The next time I'm in New York, I'm going to reach out, and if you're around, maybe I'll come, interview you again, but in your studio.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That, and that's what, and the whole idea is to, and I always talk about, you heard me say relationships, and it's building relationships such as this. People are born in different cultures and backgrounds, and that's part of music is, it's all the same 12 notes, that we all either play, listen to, and enjoy. We don't have to play them, but we can enjoy them. And part of the Cubbyhole is having that experience of, if you play or not. Our tour manager, Neville, is not a musician in the sense of, he just picked up the guitar 6 months ago, and I'm already trying to get it. He has an idea. He's investing. I need to record that, man. When we get back, we need to record that. And he's never played an instrument in his life, and he's in his late 40s. So
it sounds familiar. Yeah, I'm in my mid 40s, and I am in the same boat.
But that's the thing. If you enjoy it, you listen to it. We're not different. It's like one creates it, and it's the yin and yang of it all. One creates, and one takes it in. You can't do it by yourself. And part of the Cubbyhole is just that. Anybody who walks of life can come in, and we can all just chill out. If you smoke or don't smoke, like I said, if you have a drink, sit back and talk shit and have a good time, because we all should break bread together.
As you're saying that, I'm reminded of some of those scenes in Straight Outta Compton, the movie, where they're all just sitting around, you know, like in the studio. I mean, yeah, they got their shit done, but also a large part of that was just hanging out and just chilling and getting to know each other and, yeah, drinking, smoking, whatever. But like you said, enhancing that relationship, which obviously is going to make, you know, that recording process and working together much more symbiotic and cohesive if you guys are sort of all on the same page and in a good headspace of just hanging out.
Yeah, and that's, you know what, and that spreads. All that energy spreads because you just don't enjoy that, even though I say the cubbyhole, but you take that experience somewhere else. And that's what we need as humanity at this point.
No shit.
You know, it's kind of like we can have all the differences in the world. It's like, and there's guys that come down there in the studio in the cubbyhole and who play completely different music than I do. But at the end of the day, we can enjoy any of that, any and all of that. And that means that we can do it musically. We can do it anytime, in any place, anywhere. You know, hell, I was born and raised in Kentucky, you know, lived in New York City and traveling the world. That wasn't just sitting there being stubborn on, you know what, I'm not getting off my block. That's going out there and meeting people who you would never meet in the first place.
And that's how you grow as a person.
As a person, as people, the universal chance of us having this conversation now, you know, as I'm sitting here, like it's 8:35 on a Sunday in Dresden, Germany, and you're in Texas. You know,
where it's 1:30.
You know, and at that point, like, really, dude? 15, 20 years ago, would you even think about this?
15, 20 years ago, I didn't know that there was a Dresden.
Right, exactly. You know, even our relationship now, just building on this, you know what? You know, this cat, everybody's got some shit going on, cool. And enjoying that. And that's where, that goes back to, that's where the cubbyhole, the energy and the idea came about, because we don't have that anymore musically as people, and people don't really hang out collectively doing something together in a sense, you know, maybe in a small package, yes, but to actually show that internationally, globally, is a whole different thing. You know, like, you know, I've had Eric Gales in there, you know, Eric Gales, guitar player, you know, he's been in the studio. Vernon Reed's been in the studio, guitar players in general, but, you know, has some great musicians, and just the energy, and everyone that comes there, it's an energy. Burn some incense, talk some shit, smoke some weed if you want. You don't have to, you know, and just enjoy company. Like we used to do with our grandparents, go to our grandparents on the weekends or Sunday afternoon, or, you know, even having family dinner. It's like a family dinner to me. It's like you said, get there, sit down, shut up, and enjoy life.
I think that's awesome. Did you say you used to smoke weed with your grandparents? Just kidding.
No, not with the grandparents. I tell you, I have with my in-laws, which was some weird ass shit at the beginning. Trust me.
I'm sure it was.
You know, not going to mention names, but it was a point where it's like, it got to a point where it's like, oh man, I'm out of weed. Let me call my mother-in-law.
That is hilarious.
You're like, how does that work?
That's really funny. So you said that it's Cubby Productions. Is there a website or is there a space online where people can go to Cubby Productions?
Yeah, the Cubbyhole Productions. There's a if you can go on Facebook, KUBEHOLE on Facebook. There will be a site coming up, and there's an Instagram of the Cubbyhole. It's called The Cubbyhole. Actually, The Cubbyhole on Facebook and on Instagram. Spyz is my personal page for music and my travels. Jean Marx Express is the band. Soon there will be a YouTube channel pulling up and a website for the Cubbyhole Productions and Cubbyhole Studios. We're working on webcasts and ideas of getting people not just in music, but just being creative in any field that they do, because it takes creativeness, you know, to even punch numbers, and to how that intertwines and works. And that's part of what the Cubbyhole's webcast will be about with the YouTube channel, mixing technology with everyday creativeness, even just talking on the phone about a few things like we're doing now, blah, blah, blah. But you know, having different people from all walks of life. And I'm working on that stuff right now, along with traveling and like my own band and this tour with Jean Marx Express. You know, I'm booked through November 1st, actually, as of today.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I was going to be on production, doing a world tour, working a world tour with Chronics. And that's, part of the Cubbyhole production is going to take itself on the road we'll be in Japan and Hawaii and a few other places. So really, really show what behind the scenes of production, music, creative vibe to it, and seeing the world.
That's kick-ass. I think that what you're talking about is going to be super, super awesome.
Oh, thanks. So, it's all about trying. It's like you got to get off the couch to try. So we're going to figure some new stuff out. And thank you for taking the time because, this helps me as well. And, at the end of the day, we can help each other doing some different stuff and expand, make the world even smaller than it is now.
And it goes back to those relationships that we were talking about earlier.
Yes, correct. Yes, that is.
So, that being said, I want you to hit the rest of your social media tags where people can find you on the internet.
Personally, you can find me at Aalics, Aalics Bronson, on Facebook, Space Buddha, SPACEBUDDA, Instagram and Facebook, Cubbyhole, KUB.E.HOLE on Facebook and Instagram. Never thought about this. All of them on Twitter as well.
Now, before I let you go, Alex, is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about?
There's another band that I've worked with. I wanted to bring up Unlocking the Truth, a trio from Brooklyn. It started out 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I work with them in their stage manager production as well. They, at 12 and 13, opened up for Guns N' Roses and Slash.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, we've been on tour with Stone Temple Pilots, like I said, Guns N' Roses. Again, these are kids now, 16, 17, 18 now, and they're just amazing production writers and musicians. And they're still growing. At one point, a couple of years ago, that they were signed with, label. They had a $2 million contract and broke away from that clean with all their name and material. So,
really? They got their masters?
Yeah, they got their masters and everything back.
Wow.
So, something that's very unheard of in this industry.
Indeed.
But it says the testament of what the new industry is and what's really going on. They have a book and a documentary out as well. So, yeah, if you get a chance, check that out, too. It's Unlocking the Truth. Get your mind blown with that.
And the name of the documentary in the book, is it also Unlocking the Truth?
Breaking the Monster is the name of the documentary.
Breaking the Monster. Gotcha. Aalics Bronson, thank you so much for taking the time out of your super busy day on the other side of the planet to hang out with us and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street.
Respect to that, and we'll most definitely be in touch again, and thank you for your time as well.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Take it easy.
Thank you. Have a good one now, man.
You too. Bye. Hey guys, this is Steve Owens from Fascination Street Podcast here with a very important message. I'm awesome. I bet you thought I was going to say something else, but nope. What's important here is that I am awesome. I started this show because I truly believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear those stories. In the short time I've been doing this show, I've interviewed actors, directors, writers, inventors, podcasters, musicians, pro athletes, Olympic athletes, actual war heroes, even a Bond girl and a luthier, whatever the hell that is, and of course, regular people. From people who wanted to be stars but never gave it a real try, to big company CEOs and people who got to meet their favorite president. I love getting to meet and speak with people who have a story to tell. I feel like everyone does, and it's my job to get them to tell it. You never know who my next guest will be. An Academy Award-winning actor, a platinum-selling musician, or your own mother-in-law. But one thing is for certain, you will be fascinated by their story. So come take a walk with me down Fascination Street. You can find Fascination Street Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, FascinationStreetPod.com. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.